Hey, seventh graders. Today's lesson comes to you from my front porch, and we're going to be talking about The Highwayman today, which is a narrative poem. It's in your red literature books. I think it's page 564. That's a guess off the top of my head. I don't have the book in front of me. It's at school. But Miss Bennett can help you find the page number. It is a narrative poem, like I said, which means that it is a narrative or a story, and it's a poem. So it's both of those combined together. So it's a poem that tells a story. What you're going to do today is you're going to read that poem, and you're going to take notes as you read it, and I'm going to give you some information that you need to make sure is in your notes. So you might want to watch this video as you have a piece of paper to write on. After you finish reading and taking notes on the poem, then you will finish the questions at the end. I want to say there's 7 of them, 7 to 10 questions at the very end of the poem, and it's also in the literature book, so you need to do that. And you can do that on the same paper that you do your notes on. And it's very important that you keep up with that and turn that in because it will be counted later on. So let's start with the notes and what you need to write down and what you need to know about this poem. Well, like I said, first of all, narrative poem. Make sure you write that down and that you know what a narrative poem is. It's a poem that tells a story. Second of all, we're going to look at the rhyme and the rhythm of it. Now, this thing is long. It's a story, so I'm not going to read it line by line with you right now. But I do want you to look at the rhyme and the rhythm. That's always the very first place you should look when you're analyzing a poem because it's the easiest place to start. You might notice right away that you see trees and seas and more and door and chin and skin and thigh and sky. These are all rhyming words. So look at the rhyme pattern or the pattern made by the rhyme, and you'll see it's A, A, B, C, C, B. All right, look at that again. A, A, B, C, C, B. All right, and it's the same way through each stanza of that poem, so it's repeated. So there's our rhyme scheme, and you need to make sure that you have that written down. A, A, B, C, C, B. Next thing we need to look at is the meter, which is the beat. Now, something you should know about narrative poetry is that it usually had a beat to it. The reason why narrative poetry would exist to begin with is to tell a story in an easy-to-remember fashion. Just like how we make up songs to remember things, when stories were told orally or passed down without being written down, they were just told from person to person, having it set to a beat, almost like a song, would make it easier to remember and easier to retell. So meter would be very important. Now, if you paid attention to the video from yesterday about iambic pentameter and a sonnet, you know that an iamb is a set of 2 syllables, one stressed and one unstressed. And it's like a pair of 2 syllables. Well, there's technically something called an anapest, which is like 3 syllables as opposed to a pair. And I'm not going to hold you accountable to all those little minute details. But what you need to know is that this has sometimes 2 syllables, sometimes 3 syllables, but there's always 6 sets of those. So if there's 6 sets of syllables, then it's what's called hexameter. So that's the rhythm, or the meter is hexameter, 6 pairs. Like I said, sometimes though it gets to be 3 instead of 2, which makes it a little weird. So that's the rhyme and that's the rhythm, that's the meter. So now let's look at the plot. Now, the plot of the story is based on that whole cops and robbers, good guy, bad guy scenario. It's kind of an age-old thing. He wrote this poem, the poet wrote it in like 1906, I think was the date that I read. But he was known for writing in the style of older poets. He really liked traditional styles. And so it makes sense that he would pick a traditional story, that age-old good guy, bad guy scenario. And what we have is a doomed robber who you can't help but kind of like, even though he's a bad guy, and his ill-fated girlfriend, and them kind of getting caught. Kind of the Bonnie and Clyde type of storyline. And so that's the plot line. You have to look at your notes as almost being in 2 columns. Like in this side, I'm going to talk about the poetry aspects, the figurative language, as a poem. And then this side, thinking of it as a story, the plot stuff. So like the climax and the conflict and all that stuff. So think of it as 2 things in one: a poem and a story. Alright, so let's get started looking at the plot and the actual meat of the story. And you can follow along and look as you read. Look at the very first set of metaphors that you notice. The wind. Alright, the wind is being compared to what? It says torment of darkness. Alright, so that's a metaphor right away. And you'll notice that's imagery. Sorry, my neighbor has a loud truck. I hope you can hear me. Alright, anyway, sorry about that. Loud neighbor. You'll notice that that's imagery. Another loud truck. Sorry, it's a busy time of day. I think everybody's going home. But anyway, that's imagery. the idea of painting a picture with your words and describing what your reader should see is imagery. So make sure you mark that one as in both metaphor and imagery. Talking about the wind right there. Second one is it compares the moon to a ghostly galleon or a ship. So this moon looming up in the sky. That's a little bit of foreshadowing in the story as well. And this thing above just looking down on them. Think about nights that maybe you saw the super moon and it was like super big and super pink and super red, and it's just kind of, whoa, makes you pay attention. You'll notice that moonlight starts to represent key moments in the plot. So anywhere you see that repetition of moonlight, you probably need to jot it down and say, something's going to happen. All right. Also, you'll notice there's some alliteration going on. It'll talk about, like, for example, the darkness died, or died in darkness. And there's a couple metaphors where the road is compared to a ribbon of moonlight. So you'll make sure you mark those metaphors. Anytime you see something being compared without like or as, that's a metaphor and you need to mark it or need to jot it down. There's a hyperbole. Right. When it says the road was smoking behind him, it wasn't literally smoking, so that's an exaggeration, so that's a hyperbole. Also, there's a lot of repetition. If you know, just like in a song, a repetition is called a refrain or a chorus. So anytime you see a repetition, it's done for a reason. It's meant to drive home a message. So those are some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about as far as it goes as a poem. It would be really easy to set up your notes in like 2 columns. Like, say, first this stanza, number the stanza. Stanza 1, I saw this as a poem. And stanza 1, I saw this as a story. So you can kind of summarize the figurative language that you saw in that first stanza, and then you can summarize the plot in that first stanza, and do that stanza by stanza. So you're kind of reading and writing at the same time. That's about all I have. Just make sure that you are taking notes on it, that you're seeing those figurative language pieces, the hyperboles, the metaphors, the rhythm, all that good stuff, and that you're writing down the plot, what's happening stanza by stanza. When you finish reading the whole story, answer those questions. Like I said, at the end of the story, I want to say there's like 7 to 10 of them, and it's on the last page of the story, and the story starts out on, I believe, page 564, and Miss Bennett can confirm that for you in that Red Literature book. This will probably take you most of today, if not also tomorrow. You should take it that slow and steady. You don't need to rush through this and just, skip the whole note-taking thing. I know a lot of you really want to skip that and I just read it, I know it, I answered the questions, I'm done. No. Take notes on it and make sure you are stopping to analyze line by line the pieces of figurative language and looking at it as a poem and also looking at it as a story. If you have any questions about the story or about what you're doing, you can email me. I also put a little bit of information on the website about grades and what's coming up and what's going to be due. I hope to see you guys Friday. Thank you guys for behaving and being sweet. If you owe me late work, we're kind of out of time now. The third 9 weeks is over. It's history. And if you've waited to the last minute to get stuff done, let it be a lesson for the fourth 9 weeks. Don't wait to the end because you maybe run out of time. Sorry, big truck going down the road. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to get back to you as fast as I can. Have a great day and behave. Be sweet.